Hi, everyone. It's been quite the working day for my guest on this episode, traversing traffic and making their way to the Zoom space. And I greatly appreciate the time, greatly appreciate the travel of Gene Selassie. Gene, thank you for jumping in, joining, and bringing all of the Mach 1, Mach 2. You have several Tony Stark uh, examples of equipment back there behind you. It's very fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on this. And I wish I had Tony Stark's money, and that way I wouldn't be running from job one or job two back to the meeting. But I'm honored to be on nonetheless.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. And which of those suits is your favorite? I guess would be the question. Which one is the one that sort of speaks most to you about Iron Man?
I don't think it's on there. My all-time favorite armor is the Renaissance armor. I think it's the Mark 14. And if just after the end of Heroes Reborn, when
Hmm.
during the Heroes Return relaunch with Kurt Busiek and Sean Chen, that armor, it I know it's based off of an early Alex Ross design, but man, Sean Chen made that thing sting. That is my
Yeah,
to this day, 25 years removed, and that's still my all-time favorite on
yeah. Sean Chan is noteworthy for sure. I'm also going to note a couple of titles that I know you for. Work with Action Lab and Lion Forge. So we have the Ghoul Agency being one of those, and Puerto Rico Strong being one of the other ones. And then you're welcome to mention any other titles as well, but those are the two that I'm most familiar with.
Yes, most people. I'm lucky enough to be part of Puerto Rico Strong, which that thing won an Eisner for Best Anthology, I believe, was 2019.
Hmm.
And it was a cool project. A couple of friends that were editors there um, brought me on board. I was touched that they even thought of me, but yeah, it was a cool project that Line Forge put together. All proceeds went toward disaster relief for the hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico the year that earlier that year.
Wow, yeah. Great project. I'm wondering what drew you to comics. How did you know comics was the space? And I'm betting that the images behind you and the sort of tapping into Marvel and your longstanding love of characters is probably part of that story based on our conversation so far.
Yes, definitely. It started, I was 8 years old, living in New York. My mom brought home from a corner store, the bodega, the spinner rack. She got a three-pack for me. One of those books was in that three-pack was Iron Man 225, part one of Armor Wars. Like, couldn't have had a more apropos jumping on point for comics. And 8-year-old me loved big armored peeps beating the stuffing out of each other. And
Yeah.
as I grew older, the whole blood spilt with my sword parable really stuck with me. So I've been a huge fan of my all-time favorite character.
Yeah. Love the War Machine years. Love the work of Cap Hopgood in there. Uh, wonderful things.
Underrated.
Yeah.
Hopgood and Kaminsky,
Uh-huh.
highly underrated. I felt like that run was like the spiritual successor to Mikelini Leighton. Whereas like a lot of runs, no disrespect, a lot of runs felt like it was they were rehashing stuff like Tony falling off the wagon for the 8,000th time or losing his fortune
Hmm.
for the billionth time. Whereas Kaminsky Hopgood, it felt like it was futurism before futurism was a thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was a prime time for me in comics right there, late 80s, and then I think that was like early to mid 90s.
Yeah,
So there were lots of things happening in the world then with comics.
so many. I know the '90s gets maligned by a large portion of the audience, but there were so many gems
Hmm.
in that era as well.
Yeah. Um, well, I typically ask about writing process. I'm always interested in hearing about writing process because I'm a teacher. I like to write. So I'm curious about how you go about crafting in comics.
Well, I know everyone says we like to have an outline, and I never start without an outline, but I'm very flexible and I try to not stick so meticulously to every single beat and every single plot point. Sometimes characters start writing themselves. That's when you find that bit of magic in the storytelling where the characters come to life and they're dictating their own path.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of in the middle. Like I like to plan, but I don't let the plan dictate every single aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And love the flexibility along with the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be flexible when, especially in comics, where big ideas come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, who are some of your influences, some of your favorite writers? We probably mentioned a couple of them, but in the world of comics, in addition to comics, any names that stand out?
First and foremost, rest in peace, Dwayne McDuffie. He was a huge influence. I became a Deathlock fan because of him.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and Mark Wade, Gail Simone, Kurt Busiek, Greg Rucka, and a lot of talent today who do not get their due, like the Brandon Eastons, the Leah Williams, Greg Elise's. Too many to name. There's
Yeah.
literally too many to name. I'm a mega fan of pretty much everyone that works in the industry. And another thing is meeting so many of them at conventions.
Hmm.
I know people have bad stories about not meeting your heroes. I honestly, out of 200 plus creators that I've met at conventions, I would say less than a handful of bad experiences.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Same.
everyone's super generous, super friendly, and just giving with their time and with just kind words and pointers on making it in the industry. These people don't have to take time out of their schedule to do that, yet so many have done that for me, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, I found that on the podcasting and the writing about comics side is that most of the time, if you reach out to people, they respond very, very kindly. Just a handful of lesser experiences, but the majority, very kind people, people that want to talk about the craft. And even if they don't want to talk, even if they're not into podcasting, they'll still be nice about it, which is appreciated.
Exactly. And like I said, I'm grateful for it because these people have lives, they have jobs, they have families.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you mentioned Greg Elisi there. Love his stuff in Anansi and the way that he's brought some of that.
It's none of the worst. Spider is the most criminally underrated indie book out there right now. Just
Yeah.
burning, filled to the brim with so many. I I dare say he channels like 70s era DC Jack Kirby,
Hmm.
where it's like
Hmm.
every time you turn the page, you don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I'll go on record saying Marvel needs to put him on a book like Doctor Voodoo or Doctor Strange like yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. He would bring some amazing, amazing stuff to that by all means and take it in a new direction. Yeah. So thinking about your creating, what new directions, what directions are you exploring? And then along the same lines, who have been some of the best collaborators, the most positive people that have worked with you?
Well, one of my projects that another anthology series where I've had shorts in is called Elsewhere, and I did a take on Alice in Wonderland, but as a Alice as a Native American gunslinger in the Old West. And my June Joe Menares, artist who worked on that, his action is I I hate using the word action packed because it doesn't do justice to how intense his pages and his pacing. It's kind of reminiscent of I'd like to call him a manga inspired Jim Steranko because
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
just that even though it's just balls of all like 70s, 80s style fisticuffs, you could see the plan unfolding from point A to point B to point C on the page. And it's such clean storytelling. So I love working with him. Um, my collaborator on the Puerto Rico Strong story, Orlando Baez, he he can transition from humor to pathos and so seamlessly. And that's why I brought him on. I wanted to continue that collaboration with the book the Ghoul Agency, which uh, I love genre mashes and horror comedy is one of my favorites. So I figured, how about we create an advertising agency for the undead?
Love it, love it.
And sometimes the humor it writes itself.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that mixture of horror and comedy. That was on the top of my list to mention for you. Absolutely.
And some of my favorite films, just from TV shows, combine it flawlessly. Ghostbusters, Buffy the
Mhm.
Vampire Slayer, you name
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I'm a listener out there and I'm thinking, well, where can I find this guy? Where can I find out information? Where can I see the work? Are there convention spaces, online spaces, things like that where you would direct people?
yes, you can actually find the Ghoul Agency. At, I've found many comic shops are still actually carrying the single issues,
Nice,
and
nice.
the trade paperback you can find via Amazon, and as well as Puerto Rico Strong, and also a sports. I another thing I do. I am into sports journalism and cover MMA and pro wrestling. Wrote a book which released about a year ago called "And
Love
How
it,
They Rumbled,"
love
and
it.
wanted to go into detail about my picks for the top 80 pro wrestling matches from the last 40 years. So that's something you can also find on Amazon.
Awesome, awesome. And I will put images of the books that we've talked about in the video. I don't know if I want to cover up any of your armor, but I might just put them right here, sort of over my
No
shoulder or something.
worries. Thank you so very much. Like I said, I'm honored you reached out to me and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the work. I'm always looking for new comics, and glad I've discovered your work, and glad to have you back anytime.
Thank you. Before we go, I'm interested in finding out some of your favorite books and characters.
Well, sure, sure, absolutely. I am a classic DC reader. So about 1988, I started reading Batman. That was about, of course, the time that the Tim Burton movie came out. So that was a quick trip into comics for me. I always appreciated Superman, but Batman was just a little, had the edge. And I grew up in a small town, so I would sort of try to find issues where I could and connect with characters. So um, that was a big part. There were these huge Conan books that were like almost Rolling Stone size, like magazine formats that
Those,
I loved.
yes, those are so awesome. If you can find those in like a library,
Yeah,
keep those things up.
yeah, yeah. Well, and from there it was a quick trip into anything that I could find. Marvel at the time that was Spider-Man 2099 was one of those.
Such a
Uh
classic.
yeah, yeah, Shadowhawk, Jim Valentino's work on that was huge. And I just kind of kept reading through uh, the 90s that way into the early 2000s. And I started to discover probably 10 or 15 years ago just some of the cool work that people have done in original graphic novels that are like, you can find anything from a children's book to uh, a book that's really, for adults, Stuck Rubber Baby or something like that. So I've just continued reading and finding new things.
You never know what you're going to find. It's but I'm very much into DC as well. I was never the biggest Batman fan. I would say it's always the C listers that always appeal to me. I would say
Hmm.
Green Lantern's probably only like major franchise that I connected with, but
Yeah.
most of my favorites, I mean, you go down the list, it's like the Doom Patrol, the Outsiders, Black
Oh yeah.
Lightning, Steel, Birds of Prey, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. Was there a particular Green Lantern run that you enjoyed?
I think every Lantern had standout runs, like the Hal Jordan Renaissance during the Jeff Jones years of the 2000s.
Hmm.
Mosaic was just peak John Stewart, the Justice League, the Giffen DeMatteis Justice League International. You had Guy Gardner at his best. You know,
Yes.
the Kyle Rayner stuff from Ron Mars in the 90s.
Hmm.
Even if you get to more recent runs with Simon Bass and Jessica Cruz, and
Yeah, those are cool characters. Yeah.
exactly, and even Teen Lantern, Kelly Candela, I believe she debuted in Bendis's Young Justice run. But the Green Lantern writers, especially Jeffrey Thorne, have done so much amazing work with her.
Yeah, yeah. Did you see the big news today with the Lantern series?
Yes, I've
Yeah.
been looking forward to this. I was expecting to see something on this like maybe a year or two ago, but hey, it's
Hmm.
finally moving forward. I guess they probably wanted to let the dust settle from the James Gunn, the transition from the DCEU to DCU.
Hmm. Hmm.
And me being a mega Green Lantern fan and this essentially being hyped as, The Wire, but in space,
Yeah.
I'm on board 1000%.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I'll definitely be checking that out. Big fan of the Ron Mars, Daryl Banks run, and the thing I love about that character is that anybody can be a Lantern. It's not like Kal-El. It's anybody can kind of be part of the process, and anybody can be invited to the club. So that always makes it interesting, and you get some interesting storytelling that way.
And no knock to Kal-El. I love Superman. No lie, I'm
Oh yeah,
a
yeah.
humongous Superman fan, but yeah, Green Lantern just spoke to me in ways none of the quote big seven of the DCU did quite like that franchise does. Maybe the Flash is the closest.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely a cool character, but well, it sounds like you have lots of stories to tell and lots of characters to play with. If you could get your hands on any particular character in any particular franchise.
Um, Funny story. I actually, well, the dream project is Iron Man, and
Yeah.
funny enough, just for craps and giggles, I put together a few years ago what a friend dared me to like craft an Iron Man run and try to make it good and see what you come up with. I think I put together essentially a 5 to 6 year run with about 20 some odd story arcs. So
Wow.
I that's definitely my dream book. I actually pitched Steel a few years ago. Got pretty close to the process. War Machine,
Hmm.
Quasar. I'd love to do an all women's Agents of Shield book.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um, Black Lightning, another dream character I would love to write. Birds of Prey would be fun. Doom Patrol would be fun. Uh, uh, the Avengers, my favorite team. I
Hmm.
would, although recent years they've kind of pushed them. They seem to have become like the Justice League, and which I don't mind the big All Star team, but my peak of Avengers time is like think Roger Stern or Kurt Busiek. You had the A-listers in there with, and then mixed in you had the stalwarts like Vision, your Scarlet Witch, your Hawkeyes,
Oh
and
yeah.
then you had your newbies, and I kind of miss that era, and I would like to actually do something along the lines of West Coast Avengers,
I was gonna say I loved West Coast Avengers. Yeah,
that
yeah.
and combine the concept maybe like Kelly Thompson did a few years ago, where we had Hawkeye essentially training some younger kids. So I'm like, okay, Avengers Academy mashup with West Coast Avengers. I think that would be fun,
Hmm. Hmm.
especially the original West Coast Avengers. And given how much drama has occurred between quite a few of them in the interim years, just Hawkeye and Mockingbird on a team together after everything that's gone on between them the last 10 years, I think would be very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That human dynamic of pulling it in. It's not just the capes and things. It's the things that make those characters tick. It's
Yeah,
always
you have
interesting.
to. You have to get to the core of the character. No one will care about the fights if they don't care about the person throwing the punches.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I will make sure and share links and share the things. And I feel like we could talk about pretty much any particular character. But I appreciate the conversation and glad to have a part two at some point as well.
I'm game anytime you are.
Awesome, awesome. Sounds great. Gene, thanks so much. And I'm sending all the good vibes for lots of creating with some characters that we've talked about, as well as maybe some original characters that you probably have cooking up there as well.
Oh yeah, I have three projects that I'm working on right now. One is I'm a huge fan, a huge mecha fan, uh, Robotech Gundam, and I decided I wanted to create something in that space. So working on that. I have another sci-fi murder mystery that I've been putting together, and also a big fantasy. The only way I could describe this: think Cadillacs and dinosaurs meets Into the Badlands.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I love how you mix together genre. I love that.
It, comics you can get away with so much more than you can in cinema or television. So like, why not? I know some
Mhm.
people like to tell those grounded human stories, which I like to tell, but with a backdrop of giant robots or monsters or aliens.
Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
comics you have this big wide canvas and this toolbox that no other media has. Why not use it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. And may those projects come to fruition as well. Looking forward to seeing them.
Thank you so very much, and hope to be on again soon.
All right.